Boaters should expect some big delays at Lake Mead this summer. Construction started today on the most popular launch ramp. The water level is projected to continue to drop to an all-time low, possibly by the end of the summer.
A city of 2.3 million people, one lake, and that lake is dying. The Southern Nevada Water Authority made a $1.4 billion bet, not on growth, not on tourism, on survival. They drilled 3 miles through solid volcanic rock, hundreds of feet beneath an active reservoir, to reach water that no drought had ever touched. But here's what the headlines never told you. The lake kept dropping. The tunnel has a limit.
We're going to turn now to the dangerous drought at Lake Mead.
And 40 million people across 7 states are all fighting over the same disappearing river. Las Vegas didn't just build a pipe, they built a countdown clock. Stay with us, because what they found at the bottom changes everything. The city that was never supposed to exist. There is a place in the middle of the Mojave Desert where summer temperatures hit 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The ground is cracked and ancient. Annual rainfall, barely 4 inches. There are no rivers cutting through it. No underground lakes beneath it. No natural water supply anywhere close to it. By every rule nature ever wrote, a major city could not survive here. And yet Las Vegas does not just survive, it thrives. In 1940, it was a railroad town of about 8,000 people. Quiet, dusty, easy to forget. Then came the casinos, then came the highways, then came the air conditioning, and with it, the American obsession with reinvention. People flooded in, money flooded in, construction never stopped. The desert did not slow anyone down. It became the selling point. The heat, the isolation, the sheer absurdity of building a glittering city in the middle of nowhere, that was the draw. Las Vegas sold itself as proof that humans could build anywhere, survive anything, and reshape any landscape they chose. For decades, that story held up. By the 1970s, Las Vegas was one of the fastest growing cities in the country. By the 1990s, it was setting records for urban expansion that planners had never modeled and water managers had never prepared for. New suburbs appeared almost overnight. Golf courses opened in the middle of sand. Fountains ran 24 hours a day outside hotels that never closed. The message, spoken or not, was simple: water was not a problem here. That message was wrong. It was always wrong. But for a long time, nobody had a reason to say it out loud. Today, the Las Vegas Valley is home to more than 2.3 million residents. Every single year, an additional 40 million tourists arrive, people who need water to drink, shower, swim, and flush. The city consumes roughly 300,000 acre-feet of water annually. That is nearly 98 billion gallons. To put it in terms that actually mean something, it is enough water to put the entire island of Manhattan under 3 feet of liquid every single year. And nearly 90% of every drop comes from one place: Lake Mead.
Lake Mead outside Las Vegas, which 20 million Americans rely on for water.
Lake Mead sits on the Nevada-Arizona border, fed by the Colorado River. It was built in the 1930s, during an era when the Colorado River seemed endless. It did not seem endless because it was. It seemed endless because the measurements taken at the time happened to fall during some of the wettest decades in the region's recorded history. Nobody was lying. Nobody was hiding anything. They were just measuring the wrong years and building a century of promises on top of them. The Colorado River Compact, signed in 1922, divided the river's water among 7 states. The problem? The allocation was based on those dangerously optimistic flow readings. Scientists now know the agreement promised more water than the river actually produces in most years. That mathematical error has been quietly compounding for a century, and the bill is finally coming due. What made it worse was the silence. For decades, the gap between what the compact promised and what the river delivered was papered over by wet years, temporary reservoirs, and the kind of institutional optimism that large bureaucracies run on. Nobody wanted to be the one to stand up and say the foundation was cracked. So the cities kept growing, the farms kept irrigating, the tourists kept coming. Las Vegas inherited a water future built on a flawed calculation. A booming city, a shrinking river, and a single lake standing between 2.3 million people in catastrophe. That lake was already starting to disappear before anyone wanted to admit it.
Well, we've been hearing about the dropping water levels at Lake Mead for years.
And the people whose job it was to keep the water flowing were beginning to understand something the public had not yet grasped, that the next crisis was not a possibility somewhere in the distant future. It was already on its way. The straws that couldn't reach water, engineers have a technical term for the pipes that pull water from Lake Mead into Las Vegas. They call them intakes. But here is a more honest word for what they are: lifelines. The first lifeline was built in 1971. Engineers positioned it at an elevation of 1,050 feet above sea level, pulling water from Lake Mead and pumping it toward a city that was growing faster than anyone had predicted. At the time, it seemed like more than enough. The lake was full. The Colorado River was flowing. The idea that the water level could ever drop low enough to threaten the intake felt almost theoretical. Water managers planned for growth. They did not plan for disappearance. By 1993, the population had doubled, then doubled again. Intake number 1 could no longer carry the load alone. So the Southern Nevada Water Authority constructed a second pipe, positioned lower at an elevation of 1,000 feet as an insurance policy, a backup, a cautious move by engineers who understood that the desert does not forgive overconfidence. It still was not enough. Both pipes were designed for a world where Lake Mead stayed reasonably full, a world where the Colorado River delivered what the 1922 Compact promised. That world was already dissolving by the early 2000s. The number that kept water engineers awake at night was 895 feet. That is the elevation at which Lake Mead reaches what engineers call dead pool, the point at which water can no longer flow past Hoover Dam under any circumstances. At that level, both existing intakes become completely useless. The pipes are still in the rock, the pumps still run, but the water they were built to reach is simply gone, sitting below their openings, unreachable. By July 2022, Lake Mead had dropped to just over 1,040 feet.
As you know, is in the grip of a mega drought, and Lake Mead in particular, this is near Las Vegas.
Intake number 1 was operating dangerously close to its functional limit. The Bureau of Reclamation's own projections warned that continued decline was not just possible, it was probable. At the rate the lake was falling, water managers calculated they had years, not decades, before intake number 1 went dry entirely. Inside the Southern Nevada Water Authority, the internal alarm was no longer quiet. Something had to go deeper. The only question was whether it was even possible. The tunnel nobody believed could be built. The plan was audacious. The execution was nearly impossible. Engineers at the Southern Nevada Water Authority had a single objective: build a third intake pipe positioned so deep beneath Lake Mead's surface that no drought in recorded history could ever threaten it. Not near the bottom of the lake, below it, through the bedrock underneath the lake bed itself. The target elevation was 860 feet lower than dead pool, lower than anything either existing intake could touch, lower than any municipal water intake ever constructed in the United States. To reach it, crews would need to drill a tunnel 3 miles long through solid volcanic basalt, some of the hardest rock on the continent, while working hundreds of feet below an active reservoir holding trillions of gallons of water directly overhead. Construction began in 2008. Nothing was easy from the first day. A massive tunnel boring machine, nicknamed Sandy by the crews who operated her, was assembled underground and set to work grinding through the basalt layer by layer. Sandy measured 23 feet in diameter, wide enough to drive 2 vehicles side by side through the finished tunnel. She was powerful, precise, and completely unprepared for what the geology had waiting. Unexpected rock formations forced crews to stop and completely recalculate their approach. Equipment broke down under pressures the engineering models had underestimated. Water seeped through fissures in the rock, threatening to flood active tunnel sections before the sealing work could catch up. The heat underground was relentless. Workers operated in deafening, confined spaces, acutely aware that an active lake sat directly above their heads. One project engineer described the operation as threading a needle through a mountain, blindfolded, underwater, with no margin for error. Maintaining tunnel alignment over 3 full miles of drilling through shifting volcanic formations.
Well, construction on the Gateway Tunnel project.
Nearly 1,000 workers will lay down their tools
after spending more than $1 billion.
required constant measurement corrections. A deviation of even a few degrees, compounded across that distance, could mean missing the target shaft entirely. Every calculation carried consequences that could not be undone. At the end of the tunnel, crews drilled a vertical shaft 300 feet straight down into the lake bed to reach the intake point at 860 feet elevation. It is the deepest water intake ever built in the United States, a structure that exists in complete darkness, under crushing pressure, beneath the floor of a lake that millions of people depend on to survive. Sandy completed her run in 2014. The tunnel was sealed, tested, and declared operational in 2015. The engineering had worked. The impossible had been built. But the 7 years of drilling, problem-solving, and near disasters had also produced something else entirely. A bill, $1.4 billion. That is what it costs to guarantee a city's survival when nature stops cooperating. The Third Straw project became the most expensive municipal water infrastructure investment in American history. Every single dollar came from one source: the residents and businesses of Southern Nevada, through steadily climbing water rates that rose year after year as construction dragged on and costs mounted. Las Vegas households watched their water bills rise, not because they were using more water, because they were paying for the tunnel being drilled beneath the lake that kept them alive. It was a tax on survival, and most people had no choice but to pay it. Critics argued that $1.4 billion was an obscene amount of money to spend chasing a retreating lake deeper underground, when the same investment could have funded desalination plants, advanced water recycling systems, or demand reduction programs that address the root of the problem instead of its symptoms. Environmental groups were sharper. Building the Third Straw sent exactly the wrong message that Las Vegas could keep expanding because engineering would always find a way to keep up. It rewarded overdevelopment with infrastructure instead of demanding restraint. John Ensminger, general manager of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, pushed back directly.
John Ensminger, general manager with the Southern Nevada Water Authority.
The Third Straw was not a growth strategy. It was a survival strategy. Water managers do not have the luxury of planning for optimistic scenarios. They plan for the worst case because in the desert, the worst case has a habit of arriving early. The numbers proved him right almost immediately. By 2022, Lake Mead had dropped to levels that put intake number 1 under genuine operational stress. Without the Third Straw already in place and fully functional, water managers estimate Southern Nevada would have faced emergency restrictions severe enough to threaten the economic stability of the entire region. The $1.4 billion project, completed 7 years before the crisis peaked, had effectively served its purpose before most residents even knew what it was built for. To put the cost in perspective, $1.4 billion exceeds the total annual water infrastructure budget of most American states. For a single pipe, a single tunnel, a single intake structure sitting in permanent darkness beneath a lake that may still not hold enough water to matter. Uncomfortable question the price tag forces into the open is the same one the engineers quietly debated during every delay, every equipment failure, every cost overrun. Was the city buying survival or just buying time? The crisis arrives right on schedule. Through the early 2000s, the decline of Lake Mead was easy to miss. Year after year, the waterline slipped lower, but it happened slowly enough that it felt almost normal, like a background change no one needed to panic about. But then something shifted. The pace increased. What had once been gradual became unmistakable. The numbers started dropping faster, and the sense of stability began to disappear with them. By 2021, the situation crossed a line that had never been crossed before. Federal water managers officially declared the first ever water shortage on the Colorado River. This wasn't just symbolic, it triggered real consequences. Mandatory cuts were imposed across multiple states, forcing cities, farms, and industries to reduce their water use whether they were ready or not. Then by mid-2022, the numbers reached a point that made the crisis impossible to ignore. Lake Mead had fallen to just over 26% of its total capacity, the lowest level ever recorded since it was first filled in the 1930s.
The lake is about 60% empty, the lowest level on record.
This wasn't just a drop in numbers. It was a transformation. a reservoir that once covered 247 square miles and reached depths of over 500 feet was slowly emptying out from within. The scale of it became visible along the shoreline. Boat docks that once floated on open water were left stranded, sitting far from the edge, their ramps stretching out over dry, cracked earth. The ground itself looked bleached and lifeless, as if it had been exposed after decades of hiding beneath the surface. Along the canyon walls, a stark white ring marked the lake's former heights. This bathtub ring, as people began calling it, recorded every foot of water that had disappeared over the years. It wasn't just a visual marker, it was a timeline carved into the landscape, showing how far the lake had fallen and how quickly it had happened. As the water receded further, something even more haunting began to emerge. Long submerged structures started to reappear. Old building foundations, forgotten roads, and eventually the remains of an entire town, St. Thomas, a resort community that had been underwater since 1938, rose back into view. It was as if the lake was uncovering its own past while shrinking in the present. Looking ahead, water managers at the Bureau of Reclamation expected the situation to get worse. Their projections, based on decades of declining river inflows and increasing demand, all pointed in the same direction, down. The assumption was that the lake would continue to fall, possibly reaching even more critical levels in the coming years. Then, unexpectedly, nature intervened. The winter of 2022 to 2023 brought an extraordinary amount of snowfall to the Rocky Mountains. Snowpack levels surged far beyond seasonal averages, creating a rare and powerful surge of water waiting to be released. As spring arrived and temperatures rose, that snow began to melt gradually, feeding rivers and streams across the Colorado River basin. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Lake Mead rose more than 20 feet within a single year. Upstream, Lake Powell saw an even larger increase, climbing by more than 50 feet. For a moment, it felt like relief, like a reversal. But scientists were quick to warn against that kind of thinking. One exceptional year does not undo 2 decades of overuse and drought. Even after the rise, Lake Mead remained more than 160 feet below full capacity. The recovery was real, but it was fragile, temporary, and heavily dependent on weather patterns that are becoming less reliable over time. This is exactly the kind of uncertainty the third straw was built for. Not the years when the lake rebounds, but the years when it doesn't. The years when snowfall fails, when inflows shrink again, and when the downward projections prove accurate. Because if history has shown anything, it's this. The recovery may come and go, but the crisis isn't finished, and there will be a next time. The culture that changed everything. Drilling deeper was only half the strategy. Las Vegas recognized something early, that many cities facing water scarcity still struggle to accept engineering alone cannot solve a crisis rooted in simple arithmetic. A city using nearly 98 billion gallons of water each year, pulling from a lake that is steadily shrinking, while sitting in a desert that grows hotter with every passing decade, is not facing a temporary challenge. It is facing a structural imbalance. No tunnel, no matter how advanced or deep, can outrun numbers like these forever. So alongside the construction of the third straw, the Southern Nevada Water Authority pursued a second, less visible solution, one that didn't rely on steel or concrete. They began building a culture, and that cultural shift has produced results that are genuinely remarkable. Since 2002, Las Vegas has reduced its per capita water consumption by more than 40%. What makes this achievement even more striking is that it happened during a period of rapid population growth. The metropolitan area added hundreds of thousands of new residents, expanded its infrastructure, and continued to attract millions of visitors each year. Yet it still managed to use less total water than it did 2 decades ago.
The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York to see how Chinese visitors there are received.
By nearly every metric, this stands as one of the most dramatic urban conservation turnarounds in modern American history. These results were not accidental. They came from a series of deliberate, wide-reaching changes that reshaped how water is used, valued, and managed. One of the most important innovations lies in how Las Vegas handles indoor water. Today, the city recycles approximately 99% of it. Wastewater from homes, hotels, and businesses is treated and returned to Lake Mead, where it earns what are known as return flow credits. These credits allow the city to withdraw an equivalent amount of water again, effectively using each gallon twice. It is an elegant response to an otherwise impossible equation, and no other major American city operates this system at such scale and efficiency. But the most visible transformation happened outdoors, where water use was once at its most wasteful. In a place where evaporation rates are extreme, vast amounts of water were being used to maintain purely decorative landscapes, lush green lawns and medians, office complexes, and residential neighborhoods that serve no functional purpose. Recognizing this, Nevada passed legislation banning ornamental grass. What followed was a large-scale removal program that is now estimated to save around 6 billion gallons of water every year. That is water that no longer disappears into the dry desert air simply for the sake of appearance. The next frontier became residential consumption. Policymakers began to confront a difficult truth. When a resource is truly finite, unlimited individual use is no longer sustainable. Proposed legislation aimed to cap household water use at roughly 163,000 gallons per year, marking the first attempt of its kind in the United States to directly regulate personal water consumption at this level. It signaled a shift in thinking from water as an abundant utility to water as a limited, shared responsibility. Beyond city limits, regional cooperation added another critical layer. Federal programs began offering incentives for other cities in the Colorado River Basin
Colorado River is on the edge of another major crisis
to adopt similar conservation strategies. At the same time, the looming renegotiation of the Colorado River Compact, the nearly century-old agreement governing water distribution, forced 7 states into difficult, often tense discussions. The river no longer produces the volume of water that the original agreement assumed it would. By this point, Las Vegas had changed nearly everything within its control. It had re-engineered its systems, reshaped public behavior, and redefined its relationship with water. But even after all of that, one reality remained unavoidable. The future of the city still depends on forces far beyond its own borders. The limit the tunnel cannot reach, the tunnel is built. The conservation is working, the lake has partially recovered. Yet even with all these efforts in place, a deeper unease remains because none of it feels like enough. The reality is that the system is being pushed beyond what it was ever designed to handle. Climate projections for the American Southwest are no longer uncertain or debated in vague terms. They are clear, consistent, and increasingly alarming. The region is becoming hotter, drier, and far more unpredictable. This combination doesn't just challenge water availability, it undermines every assumption that engineers and planners once relied on when building dams, pipelines, and reservoirs. What was once considered a slow, manageable shift has accelerated. Scientific models that predicted gradual change have been updated again and again, each time pointing toward faster timelines and more extreme outcomes. In fact, scenarios that were once labeled worst case just 15 years ago are now being discussed as realistic expectations for the near future. The third intake, often called the third straw, reaches water at an elevation of 860 feet. This was not a random number. It was chosen with precision, designed to ensure access to water even if Lake Mead dropped below the level required for hydroelectric power generation at Hoover Dam. For a time, this seemed like a safeguard against the unknown. But the Colorado River system has a more unforgiving boundary. There exists a level known as Dead Pool, sitting at approximately 895 feet. Below this point, water can no longer pass through Hoover Dam under any circumstances. It is not just a technical threshold, it is a physical limit. And once that line is crossed, the third straw loses its purpose. The tunnel may still exist, perfectly engineered and intact, but the water it was built to reach would no longer be there. It becomes a solution without a problem to solve, an achievement rendered irrelevant by forces beyond human control. Adding to this concern is what scientists have uncovered through paleoclimate research. By studying tree rings and ancient geological records, they have reconstructed a history of the Colorado River Basin that stretches far beyond modern measurements.
Colorado River water rights is now in the hands of the federal government.
What they found is unsettling. The region has experienced mega droughts lasting decades, far longer and more severe than anything recorded in recent history. This suggests that the 20-year dry period that reduced Lake Mead to just 26% of its capacity might not be an anomaly at all. Instead, it could be a glimpse of what the future holds, or even a return to natural patterns that modern society is unprepared to face. At the same time, another threat is quietly emerging beneath the surface. As water levels rise and fall more dramatically, the lake bed is disturbed. Sediments that once lay undisturbed are being shifted and stirred back into circulation. These sediments are not harmless. They contain heavy metals and toxic residues left behind from decades of mining and industrial activity around the region. When water levels rise again, they can flood areas that were previously stable, releasing contamination that had long been considered contained. The third straw ensures access to water, but it cannot guarantee the safety or quality of what flows through it. And with 40 million people across 7 states depending on the Colorado River, the stakes could not be higher. Even a project as massive and advanced as this cannot promise long-term survival in the face of prolonged drought. That reality is already reshaping how policymakers and scientists think about the future. Proposals to bypass major structures like Glen Canyon Dam and restore more natural river flows reflect a dramatic shift in perspective. The infrastructure built for the past is now being questioned in the context of a very different future, one where the limits are no longer theoretical, but rapidly approaching. Utro, the third straw, cost $1.4 billion and took 7 years to build. It solved one problem, reaching water others couldn't, but it didn't solve the desert itself. Las Vegas isn't failing, but it isn't safe either. It's a city buying time in a crisis it can't fully control. Beneath Lake Mead, that tunnel still pulls water from historic depths, an extraordinary feat, but not a permanent answer. Because this isn't just Las Vegas. Cities and farms across the American West depend on the same shrinking river. The real decisions are still ahead, and no tunnel can make them. The water flows for now, but the clock hasn't stopped. If this changed how you see water, share it, and it's changed. Subscribe for what comes next.